Hello, I'm Ronald Day, Associate Vice President of the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy at the Fortune Society, and welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the criminal justice system from various perspectives, including from those most impacted by the criminal justice system. We discuss critical questions about how the current system works, its intersections with social justice, and highlight the efforts that are being made to improve the lives of everyone that is affected by it. We ask you, the viewer, to spread the word about Both Sides of the Bars and share your comments with us on Twitter at the Fortune Society. So with us today, we have Donna Hylton and Fred Patrick, and the issue that we're going to be discussing is the conversation, right, or policy changes regarding mass incarceration. There's been a lot of talk in the press, a lot of talk in the field about the left, the right, and the center coming together and coalescing around criminal justice policy reforms. And the president just commuted the sentence of 46 people. He was the first sitting president to visit a federal prison, and he also, one of the things that he did is reinstating Pell Grants to people that are incarcerated. And so we think that this is all exciting, but there's also been some conversations about like the sentencing structure and how over the years the prison population has gone down, but it has not dropped significantly. So we still have about 2.2 million people that are incarcerated in our prisons and jails. So, and 650 to 700,000 people that are being released from prisons every year. So I want to read your bios and get you involved in this conversation. So Fred Patrick is the director for the Center on Sentencing and Corrections at the Vera Institute. And he's also, full disclosure, a fantastic board member of the Fortune Society.
Thank you.
So he joined Vera in 2012 as the project director of the Pathways from Prison to Post-Secondary Education Project. And in 2015 was named the director of the Center on Sentencing and Corrections. Came to Vera from a career in public service in New York City, where he served as the Deputy Commissioner for Planning and Programs at the New York City Department of Corrections and the Commissioner of New York City Juvenile Justice Department and NYPD Deputy Commissioner for Community Affairs. So obviously wide breadth of knowledge and experience. And most recently served in executive positions. You worked at the Fortune Society as well and at NADAP, and also served as a faculty member at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And Fred has a master's degree in public affairs from Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School and a BS in political science from the Tuskegee University. And Donna Hylton, so great credentials, Fred. And Donna Hylton is a community health advocate for the Coming Home program at the St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in New York City. And you're also the founder of From Life to Life. Coming Home is a special transition case management support program designed specifically for people who have been incarcerated and are returning to the community. In her capacity, Donna identifies and addresses the needs of clients transitioning home from prison and jails. Donna is also an active member of the Coalition for Women's Prisoners, a statewide alliance of individuals and organizations dedicated to reforming the criminal justice system and its effects on women, children, and communities. Donna spent 27 years in prison, where she was a key member of the Coalition's Violence Against Women Committee on the Inside. 27 years in prison. Wow. She has participated in numerous panel discussions and public presentations and has attended multiple lobby days with legislatures in Albany since coming home. Donna is also an advocate with steps to end family violence, the state's only alternative to incarceration program for survivors or defendants. Donna has a BS degree in behavioral science and a master's in arts degree in English from Mercy College. And also, she was a 2015 cohort member of Just Leadership USA and an advocacy panel member for the New York's Women's Bar Association's Women in Prison Project. So welcome, Donna, and welcome, Fred, to Both Sides of the Bars.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So again, this shifting landscape, right? I talked about the president's criminal justice proposals. And one of the things that he also did is he went to the NAACP after he visited the prison, and he talked about changing some of the policies that, I mean, we think are pretty draconian, right? Mandatory minimum sentences. He's talking about doing away or at least cutting back severely on those. He's also talked about solitary confinement and talked about expanding access to employment for people by the Ban the Box initiative that has been growing around the country. So Fred, I want to have the first question directed to you, right? Do you think that we'll be able to significantly reduce our prison population with the proposals that are being offered?
So one, I want to say that, you know, any reform in terms of that sort of allows us to begin to sort of roll back the damage, have fewer people in prison is a good thing.
Yes.
But the reality is most of the federal reform proposals are literally federal reform proposals. And the reality is 86% of incarcerated individuals are in state prisons, not federal prison. And so while that's important, I think we have to be mindful that most of the action is at the state level. A lot of the sentencing proposals are about drug offenders, nonviolent drug offenders. The reality is, while that's a pretty hefty number in the federal system, in the state system, only about 1 in 6 incarcerated individuals has a drug offense. Over 50% have what we call violent offenses. And so to significantly roll back the tide in terms of mass incarceration, we have to get comfortable with pushing the states to do more and to deal with what we consider violent offenders.
Got it. And Donna, what is your take on that particular issue? I mean, again, all this discussion about reducing prison populations, we've seen it in some states, right? New York went from in 1999 having about 71,000 or so people inside our prisons, and now we're down to about 52,000 or so. So there is some good news in some of the states. You know, but what is your perspective on this issue?
So I'm going to come at it from the experience that I had with the 27 years. So what I saw inside was that, as you said, Fred, and you eloquently stated, that those laws or those policies that are being introduced directly affect the federal prisons. But in the state prisons, that's not the case. And so what I saw was that there were women in there from the 70s that are still in there. That when I got there, they were there, and when I left, they're still there. And I spent 27 years, so that's saying a lot. And so when, to say that the mandatory minimums, and so, I mean, there are women in there who were accessory. I mean, their crime is being accessory, like mine, and so does it warrant all that time? And what happens, or what doesn't happen, is that that's not looked at. And you have to look at, because those are labeled violent, violent offenses. If you were in a car, if you went to the mall with your friend and your friend went inside and basically robbed, and you're sitting in the car and you get caught, you're an accessory. So there are things, and there are actual crimes like that, right? Convictions like that. And so those things are not looked at. So, what I saw was that these things that are said, a lot of it to me is just mouthy, you know what I mean? It's just said, and just to give the public, to, give them something like, oh, look at what we're doing. But you're not. The reason why it dropped so much, I see, is that from the 70-something thousand to the 50-something thousand, those people were being released anyway. The truth is not actually told where people's time have come up. Conditional releases, we know what those are, right? People are able to sign themselves out after they, complete their time, or they might have had a work release program which was taken away. So at the time it worked, but you took it away, but it's still a practice, it's still a policy and a law, but you're not utilizing it. So it's not equally balanced.
And Fred, is there this shift that's taking place? Is it systemic change that's happening that you think, or is this just a tinkering at the margins? Because again, it seems that folks are finally coming together. We know that a lot of it has to do with not being able to sustain the cost of so many people being in prison. But we know that others are saying it looks like this is really a sea change that's taking place. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think we're in a moment. So when you have a president who both visits a federal prison facility, first sitting president ever, who openly talks about solitary confinement as being a ridiculous overused policy option. So I think we're in a moment when left and right are getting together and saying, let's do something. I think the onus is on people who are in the know as well as advocates to push the boundaries so that it doesn't at the end of the day become this sort of minor tweaking.
Sure.
It's easy to go after the low-hanging fruit. Everyone wants to talk about nonviolent, non-sexual, non-serious, the three nuns.
Sure.
The reality is, if you did all of that, if you took care of all of the three nuns in all states, you would at most get another 5 to 10% reduction in the prison population. Most people are thinking much more loftier than that, the notion of a 25 or 50% reduction in the next 10 or 20 years. Those low-hanging fruit don't get you there.
Got it.
So we are in an important moment, but I think the onus is how do we push people beyond the safe?
Got it. And Donna, do you see this as a systemic change that's happening now?
So, you know, it can be and it might not be. Like I said, what I've seen happen in the past is that window, that period was open and then did something and then that was the end of it. And then nothing else was said. So it's up to us, those of us in this fight, in this struggle, to continue the conversation and to keep this narrative going and to say, listen, morally and socioeconomically, it does not make any sense to keep people in prison for such long periods of time, especially when there are tools that are in prison that can show a person can be released or not. And those are the things that are not spoken about. Those pieces that the public doesn't know about, and we need to have that conversation because it's costing taxpayers much more to keep people in prison than it is to even release people. I think we have this mindset, you know, we build this fear factor up, you know, our legislature does it well, our media does it well, you know, oh, they're hard and rough criminals, they're like, you know, the dregs of society, you know, these are criminals, they're always going to be criminals. I'm not a criminal. A one-time act does not make me a criminal. That's not who I am, and I know it's not the people that I met. It's not who they are.
You talked about. Go ahead.
To that, I just want to add that I think if we're serious about this being systemic, we have to focus on jails as well.
Yes.
Sure.
You know, jails are the front door to mass incarceration.
Yes.
So you have 12 million annual admissions to jails. So at any given day, you have 62% of the jail population. Those are individuals who are languishing, and yet they are considered innocent until proven guilty.
Yes.
And all the research suggests that the longer you stay in jail, the more likely you are to get caught up in the system in terms of being convicted, longer sentence, and then more likely to recidivate if you are convicted.
Exactly.
So although the focus on prisons I think is important,
Yes, yes, sir.
we've only recently, and Vera has been sort of leading the way on this, started thinking about jails as that front door. If you keep people out of jail, you know, you won't get to prison.
Exactly.
And I want to take it a step further back, if I may, that not even jails, but let's look at our alternatives. Let's look at community alternatives, community involvement, I mean socially. We're talking about people, let's say they are low-level drug offenders. Majority of the time, a low-level drug offender is a person that has a drug habit. Not that they committed a crime because they just wanted to commit a crime, but just to take care of a habit. And it even goes further than that. There's something there that they're masking, that they're medicating, and so that's why they do what they do. And oftentimes it's a case with people that have violent offenses. Before you get to prison, before you get to jail, there's something going on. Our communities are lacking in so many things. It doesn't make sense that we pay so much to incarcerate, to pay someone to be keepers of people that are incarcerated, as opposed to a person that's going to educate, you know, children, you know, people in society. That doesn't make any sense. What are we saying that we respect more, what we morally see as, you know, the better thing, to educate or to incarcerate?
And so, Fred, you talked about jails. You think that's critical. And so how is it that we go about reducing mass incarceration? So there's a journal article by Michael Tornry. He's a pretty renowned and eminent scholar at the University of Minnesota. And his position is that we are not going to significantly reduce mass incarceration without dealing with sentencing in particular. And a lot of it has to do with jails, because if you're not in jails, you're not being sentenced for anything. And so, others think that, we can offer programs and services and so forth. But, what is your take on that? Because we are very interested in reducing mass incarceration. And we know that there are any number of services and changes that need to take place.
So I think it has to be multi-pronged, multifaceted.
Yes.
I think you have to deal with jails
Sure.
in terms of shutting off the front door.
Sure.
I think you have to do sentencing reform, particularly in the states, because again, 86% of the incarcerated population is in states. While it's important to do the federal reform, that looks like that's going to happen this year.
Yes.
Again, 86% of the folks we're talking about, though, are in the States.
Sure.
And then I think another big part of it is the services the human dignity piece. How do you treat individuals who are incarcerated in relation to what you expect of them when they return to the community? In terms of providing education while they're there, in terms of providing employment and training, because that human dignity piece is also important. How do you not lock people up in solitary confinement for far too long for no good reason, and then release folks to the streets expecting them to be normal in every way, as opposed to understanding the dilatory effects of solitary confinement? So front end, policing, better policing work, more diversion, more community programs, reducing the number of people who languish in jail who have money bail for which they don't need because they're not flight risk, they're not public safety risk, sentencing reform in both the states and the federal government, better programming to prepare people for release. I think all of those have to work together.
Yeah. So we need, as you said, a multi-pronged approach to really address this issue significantly. So there's this one thing that you've brought up, but it's kind of like it's the elephant in the room in all these other conversations, and that's the issue of violent felony offenders. And you mentioned it a second ago, how there are these women who've served really extensive times in prison, and they might be an accessory. And so I think one of the things that's mentioned in Tori's article is that we're one of the only countries that really penalizes people to that extent, that someone can get, we have 50,000 people who are serving life without parole, life without the possibility of parole sentences, and all these other folks who are getting like 25 years to life and 60 years to life, and really, really extreme. Whereas in other states, in other countries, I mean, you can get the most like 12, 15 years or so for murder. And it seems like that's consistent with the desistance research, which says that you have this age crime curve, and you have this point where younger people are more likely to be involved in crime. But then when you get to a certain age, maybe 20 or so, the chances of a person being involved in crime drop pretty precipitously.
Yes.
So why is it then that we, I mean, pretty advanced in so many other respects, are really afraid to have this conversation about what to do with people who've been convicted of violent offenses? Because everywhere you turn, every single program denies people who have violent offenses. So what's your take on that, Donna?
I think I said a little bit a few minutes ago that this fear factor, this I don't know what you want to call it. It is so massive that, you know, we prey on people with this fear. And I see it, it's just all over in the media. The shows that you watch, it comes out of the mouths of our politicians, our legislators, I mean, whomever. And you would really believe that we're in such a horrible place, that people are so horrible. But people don't look at stories. People don't look at people as stories. You know, when we talk about subjective or objective, you know, we objectify a person based on a crime or based on how they live or, you know, the conditions, you know, which they go through life, but we don't look at what's surrounding it. You know, we don't look like, well, why did this person this day go and rob someone, you know, with a knife or the gun or whatever? What made the person do that? And so when we need to start looking at that. I mean, morally, it's just the right thing to do. You know, when we talk about fundamentals, it's just the right thing to do. And when you talk about fundamental rights and fundamental policies and all these other stuff, it can be an adjective or it could be a noun. An adjective, it could be foundational, you know, and say, well, the fundamental rights of, okay, right, exactly. This needs to be structured. We need to have this. Laws need to be in place. We get that. But also the fundamental rights of a human being. That goes a little bit more intimate. It goes a little bit more morally. You look at the person and say, what's this person's rights? I think that's what you're saying. When you're inside, and when do we look at a person? When is enough enough? We're giving people a crazy amount of time. And then, but there are tools in place for you to check this person to see how their progress is and how they're going through their incarceral state. But you don't utilize it. And then you want to tell the mass majority that these are people that need to be locked up and thrown away forever. No one, I walk down the street and I sit on the subway with people every day. No one knows that I was inside for a violent crime. Because the crime is not who I am. The crime was never who I was. And that speaks to the large majority. And I said it before we started, people are aging and dying in prison. This is the only state at this time that has not given clemency to a living person in prison, now to say, oh, this person has done X, Y, this person is no longer that 17-year-old that came in. This person is no longer the 16-year-old that came in. This person is no longer the 20-year-old that came in. This is a person now. And who is this person now? We always want to go and keep it what we see in black and white. This is who this person is. No.
And we agree, at the Fortune Society, we definitely believe that no one should be judged into perpetuity, right, for a bad decision that they made. So, Fred, I want to direct that question at you as well, but I want to add just a little bit more context, because we know that even violent offenses are on a scale, right? And you could have someone who's nonviolent who's convicted of a violent crime, right? You have from murder all the way to like burglaries that can be considered violent. You have someone who's convicted of a nonviolent crime who could be potentially violent. So none of that context is really taken into consideration when you think about just saying blankly that people with violent offenses should not be eligible for this, and they're just the boogeyman.
Right. I think that's right, and I think Donna said it best in terms of no one should be viewed based on one act. That doesn't define who they are. Absolutely. I think we're overdue for a national conversation around violence and what does it mean to characterize someone as a violent offender, and how do you not let that color your judgment about that person's potential and capability and redemptive value. And it's a darn shame when we worry about scarce resources that we have so many folks over the age, and don't even think about 65 and 70 years old, because of the deteriorating effects on health and mental health of incarceration. You have a large number of people who are 50, who are not in great shape because they've done these long sentences. And we really should be having a national dialogue around why not think about a sort of massive release of those sort of individuals. It saves taxpayer dollars. All the research. Right, right. Yes. It's funny when we wanted to get tough on crime, we piled on. We said, let's try everything. Yes. Let's give states more money to build prisons, to pass tougher sentencing laws. But now when it's time to talk about reform, lots of folks want to go slow. Oh, yeah. But why not, if we're serious about reducing or ending mass incarceration, let's get bold. Let's talk about compassionate release of elderly and sick. Let's talk about other categories beyond nonviolent drug offenders who should be given opportunities.
I want to jump real quick. You said it, other countries, and they go 12 or 15 years. So what's wrong where other countries can recognize the person as an individual, as a human being, and say this person has rights? And so when we do incarcerate them, let's give them those tools that they will need to come out and be maybe the better person, or a more upstanding person, and treat them like human beings. When you incarcerate someone in this country, that's not how we treat it. Solitary confinement is usually the answer for everything. For everything. Someone could have a pencil in a wrong area at the wrong time and they'll go to solitary confinement because it was a weapon, because you thought they were going to do something. I mean, we over-criminalize everything, even within the system.
And Germany, I think, is a great example of a system built on human dignity,
yes.
Respecting the individual. So individuals there actually have their own rooms, yes. With keys. They wear civilian clothes. They're allowed to go out and get jobs.
Exactly.
The correctional officers are given 2 and 3 years of training, not 6 weeks as in some places.
And they pick them, so they're very selective.
Very selective. Very selective. Folks are, have their own kitchen utensils and are able to cook real food and real human dignity, which is a part of the German system.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, and there are other countries that are pretty far advanced
Absolutely.
to the United States.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, just, with a minute or so, what do you think it's going to take, though, for us to have that conversation expand to the point where folks would really give some serious consideration to some drastic changes?
Real quick, I just want to say this work like what I'm involved with and others like me and you involved with it, it's to start humanizing people that are incarcerated. Humanize us. I speak as I'm still there because I am. Yes. I am a human being before I'm anything else. I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm everything, a daughter. After that, I'm a human being. And so we start looking at people as human beings and hearing this story and continue the narrative. I believe that is a strong tool, one of the strongest things that we have, because all of the other stuff that's been said has been so negative and so objectifying.
Yeah. And I agree. I think it's about humanizing and realizing we're talking about mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, aunts, uncles, neighbors. So even though I earlier talked about the numbers, the aggregate numbers, those are individuals. Those are lives, and then there are lives that impact all the other lives. You know, particularly parents who are locked up, and then therefore they're deprived of being with their kids. But I think the other piece is taking advantage of every opportunity to all the forums, all the convenings, while everyone's paying attention, to push the envelope. I believe Senator Booker is the only one to date who has, as one of the elected officials, pushed the envelope and saying we need to get past just the nonviolent drug offenders. Most people are afraid of that conversation. But I think in shows like this and every opportunity, we need to say that. At the end of the day, if you let every so-called nonviolent drug offender out, you get another, again, 5 to 10% reduction in the prison population. So one, if you want to end mass incarceration, you have to be willing to do more. And we have to force people to reconcile that. If that's your goal, which I believe a lot of people want to see a significant reduction in prison population, but beginning to inform people about what that means.
And just quickly, we have a minute or so. What would we say to members of the community who might have some concern with these policy changes, thinking, oh, these people are criminals, these people have been convicted of crimes, and in some instances, maybe they deserve to be there. So in 30 seconds or so, what do you say to someone who might be fearful of these changes?
That's when I say, look at me. I am that person. I spent 27 years in prison. Would you have believed it? They never believe it. They never believe it, Ron.
Got it. Fred?
And I'd say those people are you. They're us. Everyone has done things for which there can be regret and remorse. And the reality is nobody should be defined based on one act.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna, for sharing your wisdom with us, and Fred, for you as well. Keep up the great work that you are doing. We support you, and whatever role that we can continue to play together in our collaboration, we look forward to doing it.
Thanks,
all right, thank you. So thank you to our guests, Donna Hylton and Fred Patrick, for joining us on both sides of the bars today. And thank you in TV land for joining us as well. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please check us out on the web at fortunesociety.org or Facebook by typing in the Fortune Society. This is Ronald Day as we critically look at both sides of the bars.